Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from the 8th group. We would like to present material by the title Teaching Listening, Theoretical Knowledge. Our members are Virdha Fitriana Dhewi and also Najwa Kamiliya. So guys, happy watching and listening our presentation. We hope you all could understand and get the points that we will explain. Let us start our presentation by showing our outline that we have made. So, this is our outline about this material. Our paper is divided into 3 chapters. The first chapter is Introduction. It's about background of the study and focus of the study. Meanwhile, chapter 2 is about theory. It's about topic and also subtopics. And the last chapter, which is chapter 3, is conclusion. As you see at the presentation screen, this outline has 8 crucial points that are introduction, listening, characteristic of real-life listening and topic in listening activities, listening in language learning, that are the nature of listening process and listening in practice, learner problems, the 5th, teaching listening, 6th, difficulty in listening, types of classroom listening performance, and the last is conclusion. Without further ado, I will explain about the introduction first. Keating in 20 and 90 defines listening as a process in which we are active and purposeful to understand what we hear. In understanding listening, many students face several problems to understand speaker's speech. Common problems with listening come from problems related to listening materials, difficulties in listening material, which makes students feel confused and unable to catch listening material while listening understand, and also problems that often occur in language that students fear are also a problem difficulty in listening comprehension. Ariana in 2018 states that the listening process requires active participation in learning communication between students and the receptive skills involved in understanding message. According to the explanation above, this paper was written to discuss about teaching listening. Listening, or in 1984, clearly stated that listening is a passive or receptive skill. This point has 2 subpoints that are characteristics of real-life listening and topics in listening activities. Most of our real-life listening activities are characterized by the following features. The first, we listen for a purpose and with certain expectation. Second, we make an immediate response to what we hear. Third, we see the person we are listening to. The fourth, there are some visual or environmental clues as to the meaning of what is heard. The fifth, stretches of her discourse come in short chunks. And the last, most her discourse is spontaneous and therefore differs from formal spoken prose in amount of redundancy or noise and colloquialism and in its auditory character. A listening course is suggested to also have the characteristics of real-life listening as stated above. A teacher who purposefully used English in her or his teaching process can also be considered as an indirect listening activity. Listening activities are not necessarily conducted only in a language laboratory, but they can also be in the ordinary classroom. The following topics should be covered in listening activities are hearing the sounds, understanding intonations and stress, coping with redundancy and noise, making prediction, understanding colloquial vocabulary, listening under the condition of fatigue, and understanding different accents. And the last, using visual and oral environmental clues. Using visual and oral environmental clues. Listening activities can be conducted using top-down model or bottom-up model. In a top-down model, a teacher introduces a listening top to the students. Then he or she asks the student to predict what they will listen. And in a bottom-up model, the students directly listen to the text without discussing the possible content beforehand. The next point is listening in language learning. Listening is an essential ability in second language acquisition. For most people, being able to claim knowledge of a second language means being able to speak and write in that language. Listening, on the other hand, comes and goes. The emphasis on spoken language abilities gave it a boost in 1960s. It was popular again in 1980. During the 1980s, proponents of listening in a second language were also encouraged by work in the first language field. This point has two subpoints that are the nature of listening process and listening in practice. Now, we will talk about the nature of listening process. According to the Ross in 1984, points out that listening is vital in the language classroom because it provides input for the learner. Without understanding input at the right level, any learning simply cannot begin. Listening is thus fundamental to speaking. There are several varieties of listening which may be categorized based on a variety of factors such as the reason for listening, the role of listener, and the type of text being listened to. These factors are combined in a variety of ways. These factors are combined in a variety of ways, each of which demands a unique approach on the part of listener. Now, we are going to talk the next subpoint, which is listening and practice. A challenge for the teacher in the listening classroom is to give learners some degree of control over the content of the lesson, and to personalize content so learners are able to bring something of themselves to the task. These following ways are process of learning materials that support students' learning and allowing them to actively contribute to their listening. They are making instructional goals. Making instructional goals explicit to the learner, giving learners a degree of choice and giving learners opportunity to bring their own background knowledge and experience into the classroom. The third, encouraging learners to develop a reflective attitude to learning and to develop skill in self-monitoring and self-assessment. Learner problems. The topic of listening practice as a preparation for real-life listening comprehension has been examined in Units 1 and 2. Here, we should be looking at some problems from the point of view of the learner. Learner problems are trouble with sounds, have to understand every word, and the third, can understand fast and natural native speech. Learners will often ask you to slow down and speak clearly, by which they mean pronounce each word the way it would sound in isolation, and the temptation is to do as they ask. The fourth, need to hear things more than once. The fifth, find it difficult to keep up. Again, the learner feels overloaded with incoming information. The solution is not so much to slow down the discourse, but rather to encourage them to relax and stop trying to understand everything and learn to pick out what is essential and allow themselves to ignore the rest. And the last is get tired. This is one reason why listening comprehension passages should not be too long overall, and why they should be broken up into little chunks by paused and listener response or change of speakers.
Teaching listening. Teaching listening can sometimes be a challenge for teachers. Spoken language only exists in fraction seconds, and therefore it may not be easy to judge the part and direct its student attention to them. In the same way as reading lessons normally take place, usually the teacher just provides some audio material to listen to and then proceeds with checking comprehension questions, something that is more of a test than teaching. Difficulty in listening. First is clustering. In written language, we are conditioned to pay attention to the sentence as the basic unit of organization. In spoken language, due to the memory limitation and our tendency to chunking or clustering, we break speech into smaller word groups. And the second is redundancy. Spoken language, unlike most written language, has a lot of redundancy. Next time you are in conversation, pay attention to the repetition, translation, and slight insertion of I mean and you know. Such redundancy in keeper for processing meaning by offering more time and additional information. And the third is performance variable. In spoken language, expect for planned discourse like lecture, speech, or something like that, false start, hesitation, pause, and correction are common. Native listeners are conditioned from very young age to weed out such performance variable, whether they can easily interface with comprehension in second language learners. And the fourth is colloquial language. Learners who are used to written English and or standard textbook language sometimes find it confusing and difficult to deal with everyday language. Idioms, slangs, reduced forms, and shared cultural knowledge all manifest at some point in the conversation. And the last is rate of delivery. Almost every language learner initially thinks that native speakers speak too fast. The number and length of pause used by the speaker are more important for comprehension than speed. Types of classroom listening performance. First is extensive and intensive. Students can improve their listening skills and gain valuable language input through a combination of extensive and intensive listening material and procedures. Listening to both types is very important because it provides the perfect opportunity to hear voice other than the teachers, allow students to acquire good speaking habits as a result of the spoken English they absorb and help improve their own pronunciation. And the second is reactive. Sometimes you want a seeker to only listen to the surface structure of utterance with the primary goal of getting it back to you. Well, this kind of listening performance requires little meaningful processing. It may be a legitimate, albeit minor, aspect of interactive and communicative classes. And the third, responsive. Most classroom listening activities consist of short teacher language designed to elicit immediate responses. The fourth is selective. In longer discourse such as monologue of several minutes or much longer, the student task is not to process everything that is said, but to scan the materials selectively for specific information. And the last is interactive. They are listening performance that can cover the types above because students actively participate in discussing, debates, conversation, role play, and other peer and group work. And this is a reference from our paper. Okay, I think enough from our explanation today. Thank you for your attention and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.